Not
Which was known and stated at the beginning.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started?
We're
So I know we have a lot on the agenda. Want to make sure we get folks out on time. So my name is Jenny Reed. It is 4:17 p.m. on May 18th, and I'm calling to order a meeting of the Mayor's Open Government Advisory Group. The first thing I'd like to do is have us go around the room, state our names, and if you're a member of the group, please just announce that for record and attendance. So I'll start to my right.
I'm Josh Tauber. I'm a public member, and I'm going to attempt to take notes. So,
Thank you.
FYI.
We also should be recording as well, but just in case we're not, Josh is taking notes for us. So I'm Jenny Reed, Chair of the Open Government Advisory Group.
I am Karina Satiusai, and I am the Deputy General Counsel for the Mayor.
I'm Lindsay Miller-Vieira, and Chief of Staff to the Deputy City Administrator, and I am a member.
Oh yes, and Karina is a member too.
Clarence Wardell, public member. Apologies ahead of time, I may close to 5.
David Sang with the Office of the Chief Financial Officer and a member for the CFO.
Sakina Thompson with the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services, and I do not know if I'm a member or will be or whatever. I'm happy to be here.
Dave Bishop, just an interested party.
Barney Grukov, Vice Chair of the OGAG, and I'm also going to give apologies for Julie Kanzler, who I assigned not to be here. She could have been otherwise, but I needed her somewhere else.
Michael Bentemania. I'm with Octo in the data group with Barney, and program manager for data visualization and analytics.
Bob Becker, I'm a public member.
Okay, great. So unfortunately, we do not have a quorum today.
Do you have someone on the phone?
Oh yeah, thanks. We also have someone on the phone. Sandra, do you want to say hi?
Sure. Hi, I'm Sandra Moscoso. I'm also a member of the Open Government Advisory Group.
Great. Unfortunately, we still don't have a quorum.
Aww.
What's that? We need 2 more. Yeah, we need 2 more. I know Tim White is out of town.
Tracy's still on leave.
Tracy's still on leave, and I know her designee could not come. So it will affect our ability to approve the meeting minutes. Otherwise, we can continue the meeting, and then we'll come back to the meeting minutes at our next go-around where we'll push for a quorum. At this time, before we sort of dig through the agenda, our first item is always to open up the floor for any public comment or questions.
Jenny, I would make a correction in minutes. Do you want to do that now or after?
After the public comment, yeah. So I know that we have 1 member of the public here. I don't know if you want any opening remarks,
No, other than
questions.
glad to see that the policy was put out there. It was very good.
So yeah, let's jump to the minutes. We can talk about corrections. We just can't take any formal action today on them.
On page 4, about a quarter of the way down the page, there's a line that says Beta OOG, i.e. Tracy, could make binding decisions. 2 lines below that, it says, makes it mandatory to process FOIA through central portal. That's true, but I think the next sentence is sort of missing something, because the issue is it's going to go into the public reading room automatically. Not that it's going to be processed there, but it's automatically going to go into the public. It's going to be available to the public, and the issue is the 5 to 7 days delay in it becoming public, and I don't think that's really clear there.
Could you provide some, like a suggestion for?
Well, I mean, it could say through the central, makes it mandatory to process FOIA through the central portal and to put disclosed documents online in the portal. Or disclosed records, since FOIA talks about records, not documents.
So this will go in the minutes for next time. What I did is just added clause to say and to put disclosed documents / records online in the central portal.
Right, and then the next sentence makes, I think, more sense.
Okay.
Well, we're on that topic of the bill. Can we just ask, have you heard of any movement on the bill or?
No, because the budget is taking up the council's time completely.
Sorry.
Any other comments on the minutes?
Whose committee is it in?
It's in judiciary.
Okay.
The judiciary has oversight over BIGA
Yeah.
and the OOG.
Thank you.
Well, the minutes will still be in the Google Drive when we sort of send any follow-up items. I'll send a link out, and if folks want to make edits, I just ask that you do suggestions so people can see the line changes, and then we will hopefully have a quorum next time where we can vote. If there are no other comments on the minutes, the next item is talking about new members and status updates on appointment of a new public member. So I think folks know that Alia had to resign from the group. She moved up to New York and could no longer commit. So we have a vacant spot. The Mayor's Office of Talent and Appointments did revise the order to make it 8 public members while they continue to search for a new member. So there is, I'm told that they're still looking through all the applications, but the order was revised. And then the other appointments, one appoints Karuna to take over as the rep from the Executive Office of the Mayor, and the other one was appointing Tanae, I think while she was serving in her capacity. So we probably need to get that changed so you can be the official.
Okay, thank you for filling me in.
Yeah, I just, when Josh actually put the comments in for these orders,
Okay.
I didn't realize Tanae was named.
Okay,
So, yeah.
gotcha. Okay, I'll pick that up with Jay and we'll make a decision.
Were there any other, I know you added this item, so.
Yeah, I mean, so the third thing was that there was a mayor's order that changes the makeup because it now specifies that the public members have to be residents of the district, which is actually probably good and why.
I thought that was in the bylaws anyway.
I don't know why the mayor made a mayor's order, but I happened to be Googling for stuff about our group and came across this order. So I just want to sort of flag that like the mayor is changing the makeup of the group without mentioning it to the group, which is a little bit disappointing considering the nature of this group. Do you know why? I mean, did you know about it?
I was notified, yeah, so, but I think it's a good point that probably those items could be brought to us ahead of time for our weigh-in before they're made changes through MODA.
And it was a question. So when I was encouraging people to apply to become public members, some folks asked, do I have to be a resident of the district? I was like, I don't know, probably. So this is probably in response to questions that people had. But nevertheless, it seems a little bit weird to have the group changed without letting us know. So that's all.
But I think this is sort of part of a larger problem, which is it's not just the public members who aren't showing up. It's government members who aren't showing up and we're not having quorums. So we really need to fix that.
Yes, I agree.
Well, okay, so how do we fix it?
I mean, I think part of it is making sure that the designees from the different offices are able to attend regularly, right? So like I know in most cases, folks have been pretty good if I'm looking at the attendance list. So I think it's probably worth, similarly to what we did with some public members, probably just having me reach out to those folks and just make sure they can still attend on a regular basis.
And that it's important to them that they attend, so that they make space in their schedule.
Yes.
What, for the public members, is it clear what our rights are to designate a substitute when needed? For example, Secretary here coming today from the Deputy Mayor's office, it'd be nice to have counted her in the quorum. But oftentimes, the Deputy Mayor themselves is named, but what are their rights to designate?
So I think it's a good question that we could ask for the official ruling. I mean, I think as a group we talked about how we thought it was okay if there were agencies represented on the body, that they could send a placeholder, like a designee review. But for the public members, it really needed to be them, because they were representing the public and not necessarily like, they couldn't send someone else from their institution. And so that was sort of informally what we thought was a good rule for the group.
Well, I think, but we also had a discussion about the fact that if the same people aren't here month after month, we can't continue things. We have to keep bringing other people up to speed on what's going on. So we really need a person who's going to show up on a regular basis, not send some available person in their office. And that's just as true for the government.
Yes, I agree, although I would just flag, like, for the government folks, I would personally be okay if there was, since they're representing their office, if they, on occasion, it can't be like just a new person every time, but if there's like an occasion where they can't be here, that they would be allowed to send someone else.
I think occasionally that's fine, but, you know.
Or consistently.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
yeah, I mean, but one thing that's been consistent about this body is different people at the table every time. And that's a problem.
Well, there's also been, there's been some change in staffing at the government, right? So there are people that have come into roles, like Karuna, who, is now the representative because she took on that new position. So I think there's going to be some turnover in government too that we're going to have to roll with.
But with the spirit of it being the exception, that named person can't be there.
Yeah, and I'm fine to follow up with the appointed government members just to make sure that they can still have the time commitment to show up. All right. So I will get clarity on that. I'll get clarity on whether I'll just reach out to folks to make sure they can have the time commitment. I'll clarify with MODA about when we might see a new public member appointed, and also get clarity on designees, if somebody can't make it. Anything else to follow up on new members? Barney, do you want to talk about the data inventory update?
Sure. I have some slides, which I first would apologize. I forgot how this room was configured, and the presentation I put together is going to be eye straining. The big news, of course, is everybody knows here that it was signed on the 27th. If you look at the order, which I'm not sure if that's up on the mayor's orders site yet.
Okay, it is.
Great. It's also on the Octo site. We've sort of counted May 4th as the official day because that's when the mayor announced it, so that there's a certain clock that is in the order. Agencies have to name their agency data officers and agency information security officers within 30 days, so we're giving them till June 5, since they couldn't really have known about it on 4/27. There's some other clock items, most having to do with the inventory. Octo has 60 days to release the inventory tool. We plan to do that also early June. Hopefully a nice round number like June 1. What we're doing right now on the inventory is we had a meeting, the first meeting of agency data officers since the policy was signed. Really, we had started a group called the Interagency Data Team that had been meeting every 6 weeks in anticipation of the order being signed. And those people are sort of grandfathered in as agency data officers unless an agency director tells us otherwise. There's some members of the group here. So we've already had a meeting of them and we hope to roll the tool out. We've also asked at that meeting for volunteer agencies to sort of be testers of the tool for this month. And I've got several volunteers. I decided not to do OCA because I think you guys are bringers. Kind of like, we want agencies that can convince other agencies that this wasn't so bad. But you have no credibility because you'll make him do it anyway. So we just go with it. That's what I'm hoping anyway. So I've got several volunteers, and we'll let them know next week. I'm going to meet with my staff on Monday about who they are. We hope to have the tool out early June. There's going to be a training also in early June for OCA staff and deputy mayor staff. Jenny's going to send
I'm
out
gonna send out the invite this week.
that's coming out. That's going to be our first one. There's a new provision in the order, relatively new, that general counsel should review the data classification level. So we're also aiming to work through the mayor's office of legal counsel to have a training for general counsels. First, we're going to do this one for the OCA staff and deputy mayors. The mayor's office legal counsel will attend that. And they're going to help us put together the legal training, which frankly we're not so qualified to do.
Arnie, I hope you would ask Tracy to help with that too.
I'm fine with doing that, yes. And it is closely related to FOIA. So in the legal class, in the classification systems, FOIA is mentioned. Basically, anything that's classified 2 and above, should have at least one FOIA exemption that applies. And anything that's 1 and below should be FOIA-able. And obviously data sets could be redacted or to make them FOIA-able or generalized. So FOIA is part of that legal side of the training. We're not going to try to do that training for OCA on what all the exemptions are. We can save that for the second training. Then reaching out to more agencies. So continuing the clock, once we put the tool out, agencies have 180 days to use the tool to give us all their data. We hope to be working that constantly and getting it in. After 180 days, which puts us late November, I think the 28th, if we get it out of June 1st, we have 90 days to then publish the inventory publicly. And then after that, every year we should publish the inventory at November 1, reflective of ideally what the government held at the end of the fiscal year, which puts it in the same deadlines as everything else we do, unfortunately. But I'm only myself to blame for that. So that our schedule then puts this out early January for the inventory. And that's where we are on that. I'm going to go into some of the key deadlines coming up. These are the ones I was talking about. So May 4th was announced. June 5, we want to have the list of AISOs and ADOs. Yes. Oh, sorry. I'm tapping my computer like I'm showing slides. And November 28th would be the end of the 180-day period. January 26th would be the additional 90 days. Well, hopefully we won't need that full 90 days, but we might need it, so it's on me. And then in the future, November 1. Thank you, Mike. One thing we're trying to pitch to agencies on the inventory is that maybe they've already done a lot of it. The council typically asks a question like this: please identify all the databases maintained by your office. They want a detailed description. They want the age of the system, which we're not really asking a lot of system information in this inventory. How they want to know about how the information is protected, which is relevant to the classifications, but really the bottom one is whether public can be granted access to all or part of the system. That any agency that's responded to this question for their performance hearing should have a leg up. So we're trying to remind agencies that you probably were asked this, you probably responded, let's find that person, let's find that response, and maybe you're halfway through your inventory. This wouldn't get to the classification in the level of detail that the policy requires, but it should be a great starting point for many people. With that, I'm moving on now to criteria for how we would measure this. So a lot of the purpose of the policy, is to have data-driven government in the end. There's other purposes, like we want open government, and we want to protect the right data sets. these are all purposes. But data-driven government is behind this, and therefore we have to have measurable ways to measure it. So we started on that. Some of these are yes, nos. And I showed this, an early draft of this like 2 meetings ago. And I promised to come back to the committee with it, which is what we're doing now. And it makes more sense to do it now because it was ahead of its time at that. So the little key here is that if it's actually in bold, it's already been done. Everything else is theoretical. But what's the policy? So the first part is it's executive sponsorship. We're doing well there. So Mayor's done her job. The Chief Technology Officer has done her job. And we have a CPO and a Chief Information Security Officer. OCA will begin doing theirs. They've already asked me a lot of good questions. I'm sure it's just too early to have started, really. And they're putting together the training, etc. The next part is measuring public bodies' participation. One of the things that I think the group will want to look at in the future is exactly the list of public bodies that we have. It's not completely straightforward to know all the district's public bodies, whether they are mayoral or independent. And I do have a list, and I've been assigning, frankly, Michael's staff to each public body so that we know who will deal with whom. And sometimes, for our purposes, we break them into smaller units. For example, at Chief Financial Officer, while you're one body, we think of internal tax and revenue as sort of a separate unit. But that's how we list it. But anyway, I want to bring you this list at some point and have people agree that this is roughly the right ones or we're missing somebody. There's plenty of smaller offices, particularly within EOM, where their status to me as an agency or part of something larger is not obvious. Also, things that there's varying degrees of independence, as I understand. So then once you have that baseline, then you can know what percentage have named their APOs and AISOs, and we tend to track that year over year and report in. These would be about the data inventory. Did we release the tool on time? Have we released this list of eligible public bodies? So I intend to make that open data. One of the open data sets that's really missing in this government is these are our agencies, this is how the name is spelled, this is the 3-letter acronym, like just that domain of correct answers will be an open data set. So that's one reason it's important to review that, and that's the baseline project. Have we been training public bodies? Who and how have we reached out to them? Did we release the inventory? That's a huge one, just a yes or no, but it's major. We can get into the quality of it. We intend to maintain the inventory during the year. We may even release some before that deadline. But during the year, we won't revisit each data set, but if we know we got a new one for open data, for example, we should be updating it. The two that are on here in red, I spoke with Brandon, who works for Jenny in the performance office, and he's interested in making these part of the mayor's goals and dashboard, which she can explain a little bit. But one is inventory breadth. How many public bodies have listed at least one data set in the inventory? That's a low threshold, one data set, but it gives us an idea that they've at least looked at it and done something, and what percentage of the eligible bodies have done that. The total number of data sets in the inventory, I think there should be thousands in the first year. I don't really have a very scientific estimate. I don't think it's 10,000. that we get to, but hundreds would be disappointing. And but what we intend to do is report that number, and then over time, I think that becomes a useful benchmark. How much of a useful benchmark it is the first year. Side. We also will list out who has done at least one. We've got a new one in here, which is percent of data sets reviewed by a general counsel or their designee. So that'll just be a yes/no question in the inventory. Was it reviewed? Was the classification reviewed, really? And then this is one I think the OGAG would work on is, are there observed gaps in the inventory? There might be obvious gaping gaps, like we didn't inventory 311 calls. Like, I hope that doesn't happen, but we know there's a database. Everybody knows there's a database, and there will be people around the table who will look at that. I know there's a database in this at OHE, and it's not an inventory. We want to flag those obvious gaps and not have them hurt the credibility, so track it. Moving on then to the classification, this would just be tracking the percentages of data sets in each category 0 to 4. So, and the second part is this, we hope to see 0 open data grow as a percentage over time, whether that's because we create derivative data sets from something that couldn't be shared, so now we have 2, but one of them is shareable, or we're able to feel safer releasing other things, or things get identified and then released. We have to see that, but we obviously have to begin tracking those numbers. Then there's several in here on this section that talked about FOIA as complementary to open data. We currently have a system called FOIA Express. We're just looking at that system, but the key thing is, what's the breadth of that system? There's issues there. Not everybody uses it, has it. There's licensing costs for agencies. But the goal is to have a system that everybody uses so that everybody tracks in a similar way. Are there data sets that are clearly released under FOIA, listed in FOIA Express, that we can find that we don't have an open data? Or at least they're not, there could be level 1, right? Level 1 is what we call in the data. It's public but not proactively released. Or another way would be to say released upon request. We haven't put this on a search engine, but it's you can get it. That should match up between FOIA Express and the classification. And then we have an obligation under the policy to release FOIA request metadata. Who requested it? 14 business days afterwards. So we're beginning to work on that. Gives you some idea directly from the system. Were we timely in handling these requests? Are there trends in these requests? There are issues there. There's a lot of text fields about what people requested. It's not always easy to know when they request data versus something else, or if data is embedded in a larger request that also includes reports and other things that are narrative in nature. Okay, weigh in on that. Are we doing this? Are we doing it in a safe manner? Are we getting complaints from citizens about what we post because they feel infringed by it? And then the most controversial data sets will be those listed as level 1, which an agency says, we know this is public, but we're still waiting for requests. So we would publish a list of those. The whole inventory is public, so the list is there, but focusing on that, like, do we have a good reason for those number 1s?
So can I ask a question about that? I apologize if it's already in the memo. So in the inventory, it'll also give the classification.
That's, yes. They're to be collected at the same time. and to give the classification. And lastly, this one is, not lastly, there's one more after this. So this would be for my job, or whoever holds it. I plan to stay. Have I convened the ADOs on a regular basis? We're aiming to do that every 6 weeks. That's how we've been doing it. We did postpone the last meeting because the data policy got signed on the 4th, so we just moved it to after that. It's about prioritization of the data. I'm supposed to do a streamlined process for sharing level 1 and level 2 data sets across agencies, and I established that. Frankly, that was added near the end. Like, the original draft said there'd be no agreements for that. Like, that was my streamlined process. The new draft says there have to be agreements. That if we have data that's sensitive in that nature, so then I have to amend this. I haven't amended this yet, but because that got added. One of the things we would ask OGAG is the open data portal operational and working. What do you guys think? And then the last one would be for OGAG itself. Are you participating in the prioritization process? I should come to you once we have an inventory. Here's stuff that we know we should make public, but for various reasons we haven't. A good excuse would be we haven't documented this data set very well. We need to be able to explain what it is before we just put it out there, or it needs some scrubbing, or we think the data is so horrible that putting it out there, so horrible in quality, would be misleading. We've encountered it in various agencies that feel that. Anyway, but all of those would be prioritized for future publication. We should come with something like that. You should have the opportunity in the policy to make recommendations to improve the policy itself. So one of the areas that was contentious right down to the end was copyrightable information. There's still an important paragraph in there about copyrightable information, but the most offensive sentence from last meeting was deleted. But for example, that might be something you want to look at. How many agencies are claiming copyrightable information? Is that really impinging the policy or not? It's certainly something that we've already flagged, right? But next year, does that require a change, yes or no? Are our fears realized or not? Then finally, the last one would be to annually look at these criteria and to adjust them. I should have let you ask questions along the way because I was, yeah.
Well, Barney, is this whole process being documented in a data set somewhere so that, let's say somebody wants to know what an agency's response has been to what it was required to do, they can find that information, or they can find the ADOs and the ADSOs, a list of those people at the agencies?
My intention is to have a public dashboard with these criteria and report on them. I don't know that I want to, I mean, who works for an agency is public, but I don't know that I want to publish the marketing list to Oracle of who the ADOs are, but I have to talk that over with them.
I mean, we have a list of FOI officers. We should have an available list of the people who are responsible for this.
I kind of believe you.
Although I get the concern.
Yeah. We do get a lot of IT marketing.
Can I just ask a question though? Is the ADO the same person who's also then communicating with the public if they have questions? Because that seemed to be what you were getting at, Bob. Like, who's the public liaison
Or
on
I'm
the data, which
having
may
a
not be
problem
the
with
ADO.
getting data or understanding the data or getting the data.
Right.
Who do I call at the agency to fix my problem?
That may not be the same person as we envision. So I think your point is very important. I'm just saying this may not be the right list of folks, right? I mean, if you're thinking through like, it's a different role than what we've asked them to fill.
They're both important roles.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, even if that's a role that we don't have data for, that is what we do have data for.
Yeah, no, and I'm thinking there might need to be like a third
category.
I understand getting
created
spam,
of,
but-
like, who's
but
your public
that-
data
You know, that's a
officer.
problem that needs to be solved a different way than
Right.
keeping the
I think it's a good point. There is a list of public information officers, for example. The people we're targeting to be agency data officers, and I think if you came to our meetings, you'd say we're pretty successful, are analyst types in the agency. They tend to be internally facing, and they may not be there for their people skills, but they're good, they're fun people. They're there,
You
and
say I don't have people.
But they may not be the public
they
information
may not
officer,
be,
who's a
right,
different person.
and they may not be a good use of their time. So
You
let
know,
me think that.
But there
through.
needs
I think those are
to be-
two separate questions, both of which need to be considered. Because the who do you contact is a really important one, but then the other question is the extent to which that data set is,
So we hope to make them that expert, right?
yeah.
Now, whether you go through the public information officer and then they, hopefully we reach them.
there have been
Or you
times,
go
there have
direct.
been times when I've used data from like BJS, Bureau of Justice Statistics. And it's very helpful to be able to call the analyst or talk to the analyst who is responsible for the data set.
So should,
As in the owner
So-
of the data set?
Well,
Right.
no, the owner
Or
is Justice
who to
Department, but
call.
I mean the person who
Right,
manages
that's the
that
expert
data.
interesting
on the data
point.
set.
What you're asking for, and again,
Correct.
I feel like this is 100% important, like all the public data sets should have like a main point of contact. It just may be different.
Then the-
It may not
Yeah.
be the ADO either. I mean, the
Yeah,
idea is one of those per agency, but they won't necessarily know about every data set.
right.
Also, the fact is, we're staffed at a different level than a Department of Justice that is publishing a data set consistently nationally, or a Census Bureau.
Yeah.
It's
It makes sense.
it's a fair comparison to some degree, but also not.
It makes sense to think about it in the intersection of FOIA though, because when we're doing trainings for like the general counsels or the public information officers in response to like reviewing classification, it could be a conversation there of FOIA officers are usually in the counsel's office for agencies and they're usually dealing with folks for requesting. So it's having a conversation with them to understand that these requests will also be coming through and they can help facilitate who in their office responds, if anyone responds, or who is the public, because an analyst might not want to be published and contacted directly, and it can help go through the public information.
Yes, it would be the agency's decision to put in there, and I believe on a lot of our data sets, you will find a human's name, but it's also, you will find that it's the same problem we talked about at the beginning of this meeting. That person has changed agencies, moved on, their phone number's different, things like that.
So what do best practices in terms of open data tell us about that point? Like, what are the best ways to provide the public with points of contact or ways to interact? This, it seems like the whole point of this is to be open and available and have a dialogue. So,
You have to demonstrate that you've complied with this order, because it kind of gives that person, per the order, the responsibility to be the liaison, both internally facing and publicly facing. Did I misread that?
I don't think, well, you tell me, I mean, that is not how I understood the ADO role, interpreted the ADO role to be agency data officer, to be the internal liaison, to be working with Octo, to fill out the inventory and make sure that, there's a point for the classification, not necessarily that they're also the one answering questions from the public, which could be very time consuming. And so we need to think
Yeah, I think
about.
you want to tailor it, because you don't want them answering questions, but receiving requests that you get filtered through to this body through a process.
Yeah. I think it's thinking about the public in the generic sense is part of the problem here, because some of the people who are going to be looking for that information are researchers, they're lawyers, they're all kinds of people that have very specialized needs, and they really need to be able to drill into the data. So it's not just some person up in Tenleytown who's just got a question, it's people who really are trying to
That's
use the data.
Why the agencies like to funnel some of these requests through people like the Public Information. Hopefully, those people are triaging the requests and getting the requester to the right person, whether.
My guess is that they don't know enough.
So, but you have the same problem with public information officers as you're going to have with
Yes.
the agency data officers,
Right.
which, and I'll also take the position that, like, knowing from what I've seen on the inside, is these positions are filled at best 50% of the time with a person who's doing 3 other jobs or 5 other jobs. And, it's going to be very difficult to get the level of participation from each of these different roles, because any agency director is likely to tap the same human being for all of these, roles that end with an O. And it just kind of breaks down from there.
There's one other minor complaint from my end. Some agencies have been sending more than one person to our meetings, and I'm thrilled. Like, I'm not trying to say Bob's it and Michael's not. Like, as long as they're sending at least one, I'm kind of happy. I haven't pushed them to say who's the right one. But we could list multiples, but I have to deal with that. I haven't dealt with that. In fact, we sent out an email from the CTO to her fellow directors saying it was okay to have more than one. We want at least one.
Can I make a suggestion that we go back to the interagency data team and ask them what they think a process might be, and then bring it back to the group for feedback before? Because I just think that part of it is, this is a new agent. A lot of agencies have lots of public data, but we're doing this in a much bigger and more thorough way. There's going to be more work for the ADOs because of this policy, and it's good work, but we just need to make sure it's all managed in a way that we can also be responsive to people when they're calling in. And I think we need to let the agencies weigh in and then bring it back to this group and see if it suffices in terms of making sense for the public. From the person all the way up in Tenley Town to the Brookings researcher, right, who does this every day for a living.
We can definitely ask.
Yeah. What do you do on the open data site right now for data sets?
We used to. I'm remembering a few years back. We used to list the data steward in the metadata. I haven't checked lately, and that's what we would want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for the data set, not necessarily the same person as the ADO.
Right.
So
Right.
Department of Environment, lots of different data sets, but
Lots of data stewards, right,
Right.
yeah.
Um,
That's I think we need to ask for their feedback.
And that's a little bit buried, but kind of intentionally. Like, you have to go into the metadata record.
That's also where you should be able to find out what all of the attributes mean, and hopefully it's robust enough so that you don't have to call them.
Right.
And if you do call them enough, hopefully they'll make it more robust and you stop calling. The intentional workflow there.
Would it also be helpful to have the public tell us what their expectations are or what their desires are in terms of what they would like to see? What they have seen in other, just like that. I mean, I do think that getting content, not just what the agencies think should happen, but what is it the public is wanting to see? Isn't that part of the data?
Well, could this be something that we can get feedback on the public on through the Data Stewards Toolkit that you guys are working on?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think the toolkit is meant to get, for that we're hoping to get input from Gov people, not from the public. But I think the public members of this group can answer that question to some extent.
Yeah.
Let's come on.
Yeah, but I don't think there is, to your question before, I don't think there is a best practice for this that anyone is really doing well yet. So we have an opportunity to create one.
Yeah.
Anything that reasonably connects people to outside people, to real humans on the inside, would be great.
Yeah, I think what you're kind of describing sounds like fairly progressive to me in terms of being able to reach inside an agency to ask specific questions and query about a data set in a way that a researcher would. I think that'd be a great aspirational goal for us, but not necessarily something I've seen that's like part and parcel with other open data efforts.
Yeah, I just opened one on random that I think would be well documented. So this is an OTR data set, and it says contact manager, maps and titles. Right, that's very appropriate, I think. It's
A
name,
role
position,
versus
it's a role, but it's not a name.
Because he's the subject matter expert.
Right.
But even prior to that, though, it lists what each of the attributes are, you know, and so it does a pretty good job of hopefully informing what the data means when you pull it down.
Yeah.
Ideally, probably some of your biggest users of that information might be internal to government, where we're trying to understand and how to reach out to another department.
That will definitely happen. One of the whole purposes of the interagency data team is to get these folks to know each other because, frankly, we want them to see the benefit. They need each other's data, but they have to realize it's only easy to get. We don't want freeloaders. We want them to contribute and take.
Yep.
And knowing their colleagues is key.
Oh, and if I can add, can you go back to the highlighted ones in red? Just so what Barney was speaking about earlier, so there's sort of two different ways that we look at sort of performance. Well, there's many ways we look at performance in government, but sort of two big ways that we try to really drive stuff forward. So one is through agencies' individual performance plans where they have their KPIs that they set each year and, you know, we get regular updates on how they're progressing. What we're developing right now that'll be new starting in FY18 is a set of what we're calling good governance metrics, which are a common set of metrics that will apply across agencies on their basic business functions. And we are trying to measure not only things like budgeting and HR, but also looking at like openness and transparency. And so these measures are going to play into that. The other avenue where this plays in is we have a set of district priority goals that are 25 sort of cross-cutting goals that look to make progress on really big, important issues. And one of them is to make DC a leader in open government. And for each of these goals, we have strategies and specific initiatives, as well as metrics to tell us how well we're doing. This is one that I would actually like to think about bringing to the group for our next meeting and having the group discuss and provide ideas on what the right strategy should be and how we should define success. We've talked a lot about open data, which is really, really good. There are other parts to open government that we should talk about. And I would love to get the suggestions and ideas from this group about what are the long-term strategies we should be working for, what are the metrics we should adopt to know if we're being successful, and then if there are any concrete things that we should think about trying to do in the upcoming year. You know, we'd be constrained by funding, but there's still a lot we can do in the open government space. I think that'd be really helpful.
Who's the we in that? Is that you, or is that like city administrator? I don't know how that, like, I don't even know where you are.
Oh, I'm in the city administrator's office. So when I say we, the district priority goals are the goals from the mayor and the city administrators. These are the district's goals.
Barney, question about, you said some of the data sets you have really poor quality in terms of what's there. Is there any part of this process that looks at those data sets and says, why are we keeping them? And if we're not keeping them in better quality, why are we keeping them at all?
There isn't. I mean, officially, I think it's a great question. The one that I keep hearing about, like I've been pushing DCRA to publish some, and they're concerned about the quality of the data. That, for example, certificates of occupancy may say one thing in the database, but the actual certificate, you know, there may be disconnects between their database and their certificate, and what we made available, things like that. I don't fully understand that one or how it gets there, so it's a concern. I'm trying to push that on the agency and make it, I mean, without owning all the problems, but they're clearly, it's an indication that there's a problem if the data is in terrible shape. There are also just interpretations, like, we didn't know where to put this, so we stick it in this field. Because we have a COT system, we don't control it, and we do it this way, or 3 years ago we did it this way, now we stopped doing it, and we do it another way, and you get things like that.
I mean, part of the problem is that government collects a lot of information. There's a question about, you have to ask, why are they collecting that piece of information so avidly? And it costs
That
money
is-
to do that, and then it causes problems when somebody asks for it. So
There
what
is
the
a
heck are we
section
even
in the
keeping?
policy that talks about that. I mean, it doesn't talk about it in any of the sections with deadlines, but it talks about that in the protected minimum data protection standards. The first one is don't collect data you don't need. So there's a guideline that is established that we can point to for that purpose. I mean, any data you collect that you don't need is just unnecessary risk because we have to protect it.
I hope that the inventory will help us understand a little bit more too, where we're collecting the same data over and over and over again. And I think that's part of the inventory, part of sharing the data more internally and externally, how we combat against that. I think if there's bad data, like because someone's entering in bad data, that's something I think you could always flag for me or for Barney, and we can try to figure out, like, is someone at the agency just inputting wrong data, or is it that bad data in terms of it can't be useful for certain applications because we never get a big enough sample size, or is it bad data because we're not putting out the right metadata descriptions to help, so it's sort of
It's
depending on
obsolete.
what bad is. Yeah, or it's obsolete, exactly.
Right.
And then we don't need to collect it.
And we don't really get there, I think, until we have an inventory. To me, that's sort of what do we put on the quit list, and so, I mean, maybe that's more sort of phase 2 work or phase 1.2.
But that's why I asked the
Right.
question. We're going through this whole inventory process.
Right.
It seems like that's a logical piece of the inquiry.
Well, maybe it should be. Maybe we don't wait until it's in the inventory. I don't know.
It may expose stuff to, hopefully the directors will begin to look at this.
Yeah.
And if they see it. There it is. Now, I mean, one of the thresholds that's in here is we have this definition of enterprise data set, which was purposely done so that we would focus on the ones that are most important. I think a lot of these are going to be on the edge of were they enterprise data sets or not, and whether we were worried about agencies having to inventory everybody's shared drive and every spreadsheet and what's out there. So that may work against this to some degree, but that's part of later on. Or do we have obvious holes in our inventory, which was on the criteria? We'll check out.
I have a question. Tell me if it's relevant about how we measure success. On the list so far, I see ways to measure the fidelity of the process and ways to measure not just the fidelity of the process, but how much we're accomplishing. And I'm wondering, do we want to measure how much, once things are out there, are there ways to measure how much the public is using them? Maybe that's the goal, but then more of the outcome as opposed to the output.
We would like, the KPI I would love to have with Jenny when her people come asking is, how much is the data being utilized?
Right.
And the real outcome they want is it doing good in the world? But that's too much,
Right.
there's too many variables. And the assumption is if there are people are coming back for it time and time again, they're finding it useful. If they're finding it useful, hopefully they're not using it for fraud. There are problems with that right now. So we make the data available numerous different ways. People can download it, people can get it as a service, people get it off. We really don't know. how to add all this up and have a place where we can measure utilization of a place. And the data comes from numerous different sources. So the answer is we would love to measure utilization of the data, but right now, I don't think we can give you meaningful numbers.
I think that's okay, but I think similar to the issue about quality of data, that there should be a place where we have place markers, at least for these issues about how we measure success. So ultimately, we want to know about utilization. Ultimately, we want to know about the quality of the data and asking those critical questions as to what, if the data is bad, why are we collecting it? I don't know if it makes the list now, but it's something that we should park. These are issues that we should certainly park for inclusion.
One thing I think people will be disappointed in is we're not asking a whole lot of questions in this inventory. What is it? Describe it. What's the system it's in? For example, we're not asking how many records there are. Well, maybe it's changing every day, whatever. We're not asking about if you think it's quality. We're not asking necessarily even every field of the data dictionary, although we'd like to. We have a place where they could attach that. So I think when it first comes out, people are going to go, "That's all you did." But we're also trying to make it really easy for agencies to comply and not have them run in the other direction and not comply at all. So there's a trade-off there, and I think people will want more fields collected over time, and hopefully this year's the hardest, where we're starting from nothing, and next year we'll have an inventory, and most of it would be, okay, same thing. We can maybe add a field or two. That's my hope.
There's a little middle ground between how many records or downloads there are, and is it a perfect world, which is not measurable. But so from the use side, we could do qualitative analysis. Are there any use cases that we would be happy to say that was, here's a data set that was actually used and was used for this, and it may not be representative of the whole thing, but at least there was one outcome. And then a harder one is part of the reason I think we're doing the data inventory at all is very long-term play on getting the district to manage its data better internally, which has ramifications for the public on the outside. So are there things that we can look at that?
There was one that.
While you're pulling that up, I'll just say, since it's really long-term, it may not make sense. It's something we should maybe bookmark. But
yeah, this stuff's really about how we measure success in this first year, more so than
right
5 years down the road.
So
Right?
we should change this criteria. The second one under the CDO's performance is I put in the policy there. I have this power to designate a citywide domain table, I'm calling it, or you can call it master data management. But the first one I want to do is, this is the list of DC agencies, how they're spelled and what the 3 letters are. But there should be others, there's others that I believe we already have. For example, we've kept for years in our office the master address repository. So these are the addresses that are on the streets.
Or our Outlook contact info.
That's a lot.
That's a
rough
tough
data
one.
set.
But anyway, these would want to be very high quality data sets
Just internally.
that hope that I know this agency one it's in every system. Everybody has a table. None of them agree.
Yeah.
That's so true.
And
Talk about that, David.
and so that's one to watch and to see if we do that and if the ones we declare are defensible. You have to have a steward for each of those who's really going to.
Right.
I mean, clearly SOAR is the official, account of things that could be named here.
Josh, I really like your first point on sort of the use cases, because I think also, to me, not being a data person per se, what I'm really interested in is how is the public or how are research institutions benefiting from what we're making available, right? And so if we have an idea of how that's really going, I think that does ultimately show where we're going long term. And while it's not, quantitative, it being able to say at the end of this, this initial inventory effort, and maybe a few months down the line, yes, we made this available, or we made it known that this data set is here, and that triggered this interaction. And so I think that's a really exciting idea, and I think there's a way to showcase that in a public fashion. It's not a KPI, but that's okay. And so I think that will be a real success story of this whole effort. And it's something that I think this group can probably help put some shape around too.
And it would seem we could get some of that data from Google Analytics, because people come in from the outside on the web and get to it.
Yeah.
Well, and I wonder do you ask for, like, either on the Open Government site or on the Open Data site, do you ask people to sort of share back to you what they've done with the data?
Yeah.
Try to get their members jobs on those sites, and it was like, really? That's cool, you're using it. I was going to show one thing. We did show last month, I think, the new Open Data site. It's kind of got a place to tell these sorts of stories. Obviously, we're going to tell the ones that are positive.
It seems like, not for the first year, but you're asking the agencies what data sets do they maintain. It might be worthwhile asking them, what data sets do you use?
In a way, that's part of the definition of enterprise data set. Like, what's really important, what are the determinations and transactions and things that
It may not be that agency's data sets, they may be using other agencies, but the point is finding out what they're using.
like this one we're talking about right now. So on the Open Data site, there's different pages that we can link to. This one talks about all the aerial photography and how it gets used, and you can see it in different years, things like that. Anyway, this one was put up by Octo, but we're encouraging agencies. Today we met with DDOE to put something here to show off how people could use it. Or this one is about business incentives from DEMPED. This is Office of Planning. These are just ways of featuring things that are. This is when buildings were built in the city, and it's a pretty cool data set. Or it would also to highlight new stuff that's been added to the catalog. So I don't know that this answers your question, but we've kind of got this place to, if we have a good story, to put it out there. But obviously we're cherry picking.
Well, I think our public members could probably help tell us what, at least it wouldn't be like 100% comprehensive, but there's definitely groups represented here that could help us with how folks are taking data and using it.
If this is a good opportunity to segue into the next agenda.
Oh, sure. The Data Publisher Toolkit?
So one of the things, so slightly separate from the toolkit itself, one of the things that we had talked about, Kathy, Sandra, Julie, Denny talked about it a little bit last time, and I'm hopefully not missing anyone, is creating a blog where we can highlight stories, in particular things, good stories, good examples of things that are going well. So we sort of ended up at the place that we thought would be better to have it not be an official OGAG thing, but something that any of us might want to contribute to in official or unofficial capacities. I mean, official for government people, probably unofficial for non-government people. And one of the things that I thought is important about that is that it be honest in a way, so that it's believable stories, not like a PR thing. I think like Barney's point that the Open Data site is going to probably cherry pick good stories. It makes it hard to kind of get into like what are the best practices out of other people's failures, which is to say we want to highlight failures, but if there are people that want to talk about their failures, right, or if that's a part of the story, that people are willing to share, then a blog might be a good place for that. So I'm personally hoping that other folks in this group will want to join us and find something from within their agency that they can, or outside of the agency, that they would like to share. And it's something that I'm also hoping just like to work on myself because I like writing. So I'd love to like work also with you all on unearthing those stories. So we'll probably maybe send out another email on that sort of thing. The other thing that we're working on, which you all got an email about, is we want to create a toolkit and a guide based on working with people, gov folks at agencies who are already publishing data and are kind of on board with the idea of open data, but are having trouble reaching their stakeholders. Or need an extra pair of hands who can help them reach the stakeholders, or maybe clean up the data a little bit, or get some advice. So we have, I think, Manya, DemPed, was there a third one? Do you remember? Maybe. Who are interested in working with us on that. So if anyone else wants to help create a data publishers toolkit on the, I think this is different from sort of the toolkit that Barney's working on the inside. This is more from the practicalities of reaching stakeholders. Let any of us know. Sandra, if you're still there and I missed anything.
No, that's it. I was trying to text you while you were talking so that in case it pops up in front of you.
It does.
So far it is DemPed and DPL for our agencies that we're going to work with, and I think we have a time for next week that pretty much everyone but Manya can make, so I think we should go with that date, the 25th of May, Thursday. Otherwise you said it all.
And the goal of this too is to use these experiences to then have something that you can share, or we can share across the agencies with, here's some ways you can, when you're putting this data out, you can make sure you're connecting with your stakeholders, right? Okay.
Yeah. So tips, so one of the things Sandra suggested was include links to data in your press releases so that the folks who care about the press release and want to go a little bit further can actually find the data that you use to, if you have a press release that concludes with an analysis, let folks know how to get the data that you used in the analysis. So there might be other tips that we'll unearth as we're putting this together.
And I would say, and maybe go a little bit further, not if you're using data in your press release, but maybe you should always, right? There's probably always data behind a decision to take on an initiative or to invest in something. And so kind of making that part of what you're communicating in the press release and then helping others find it. I think that's like the perfect, in my mind, scenario.
And just in terms of linking that, so if DemPed and DCPL are your guinea pigs in this effort, how could we, when we see some, you've got some testing underway and you have something ready to share, how could we help spread that kind of toolkit throughout the district government? We obviously have the interagency data team, but I also, to me, what I'm hearing in all of that is, there's also likely lots of audiences that may be siloed in terms of function, right? But how could we reach leadership? How could we reach communications folks? How could we reach the actual owners of the data? How do we reach the policy folks? So there's, I'd encourage us to, as you're thinking through that, I probably have some thoughts on it, but I'd have to see what it looks like.
Yeah.
But there's so many different audiences for that message, and so many different channels to take it through. So I want to help with that when we have a finished thing.
That's perfect, because I don't think we have any idea really how we're going to do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, it's exciting. And if there's any other agencies that folks think would be willing to be guinea pigs or might be interested or need help, definitely reach out to the group, or you can always reach out to me and I'll connect you to the group. So that was it on the items, the core items for our agenda. In terms of next steps, I think there's a couple really concrete things that we need to go to MODA about and report back next time on the additional public member, changes to the mayor's order, and whether or not designees can come and be counted as official for the quorum. I know there's some work Barney's going to do to go back to the data team and ask for how do we essentially create data stewards in this sort of transparent way. And then the other piece is, if folks are open to it, I'd like to use the next meeting to talk about that district priority goal about making DC leader in open government, and what does that mean? What does that look like? What are some ideas that we have so we can start to shape that and start to put some measures around it?
And I have a request.
Yeah.
Would somebody create a mailing list
Oh,
of this group
right.
so that we can just call the mailing list up to send things to everybody, because this group has been so fluid, it's impossible to maintain my own. Who's on first,
Can Octo do that?
It can, but it is the email central team that does it. So, what I tend to be doing is going back to the last appointment you sent out and replying to all. Because otherwise, what we've got to do is every time there's a change, we've got to get email central team to do it.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe that'll get us to formalize.
but
processing what happens when we change.
in the Exchange server, there are all of these mailing lists of people on a regular circulation, and we should have one.
We can do
We
it.
can also use Gov delivery as well.
Or set up an address that just forwards to everybody.
There is an address that is ogag@dc.gov. That right now is just used on our website, and it goes to Jenny and I. And we do get public inquiries through the website. So this would be like OGAG members or something like that.
I don't know if that's what you just meant also, but there's also our stakeholders who are interested in our meetings and our outputs that we might want to have a mailing list for, so that we can alert them to meetings and outputs. A mailing list they can participate in would be good, but at least one for announcements would probably be valuable also. So something that can hold non-DC.gov email addresses, which might make two mailing lists.
So that might be the Gov delivery piece that you were talking about.
It could be, Gov delivery might be good. What I did look into this when I set up the OGAG, that the old one had all the old members from the original Mayor Gray committee. And it took forever to change them, in part because Okta was on Office 365 and most of the rest of the government wasn't, and all that's changing right now. But I got it down to just us. Let me talk to Mike. Gov delivery definitely works. That's what we're using for the interagency data team, for example. We use that for the GIS steering committee list.
The other thing I'll go up and just show as a way that you can sort of figure out how to get around that is I did create a list through the Google Drive. I do have an Excel list with everyone's name and their email address that you could copy and paste from. So it's just on the Google Drive itself, on the home page. This is actually going to be more complicated than I thought, but just on that, you'll see OGAG member list, and then you can copy the email addresses from that.
It's just much easier if we could do it just through Exchange, which is supposed to be set up to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well,
And we're being forced to use Exchange. We ought to get some of the benefits.
There must be an upside. Somewhere there's an upside.
You think there's benefits?
Well, I'll work with you, Barney, on the a members only list, and then we'll have to think about the best mechanism for the broader stakeholder list.
Yeah, the broader stakeholder list. That's really Gov delivery is great. It allows people to unsubscribe, things like that. So it's more professional. If you get on it, you think, why are these people keep emailing me? That's clueless.
Okay, anything else? All right, it is 5:32 and we're adjourning the Open Government Advisory Group. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.